Misthological Models Part 5, A Panoramic View of New Jerusalem. Chapter 3, New Jerusalem in Transition. Michael notes sightings of New Jerusalem above our planet in the past. Apparently, New Jerusalem was partially decloaked and transitory. Sightings of the aerial New Jerusalem, as described by St. John the Divine in Revelation at the beginning of the Christian era, have been reported on many subsequent occasions, often at moments of millenarian excitement. The city comes, stays, is revealed. In my book, Predestination and the Open View describes the coming of the city and what happens at the rapture. In Misthological Models Part 5, which is my current book, I tweak my presentation from Predestination and the Open View in harmony with that of Trenholm. Journey to Tricon, My Trip to Heaven and Back by A.W. Trenholm led me to modify my own views, modified in conjunction now in the present book. The city comes before the time of the rapture. At the time of the rapture, we are called up to the city in the clouds, which stays cloaked in orbit. The city stays in the clouds and is revealed, decloaked, at the end of the tribulation. Trenholm says God has the power to make the inside of the city any size he wants without changing the outer physical size of the city. God could fill the city with multiple dimensions and universes, an endless spiritual space never even seen or imagined before. Our God could open up within the city itself portals or doors to new worlds and wonders, places physical and spiritual that are as yet unimagined, mansions unseen. If he wanted to, he can make these only accessible by those who live in the city and are citizens of his kingdom. At the moment, the city itself is stationed very close to earth and rests largely in temporal space, though it stays slightly deeper in the spiritual dimension to avoid detection from earth. It is somewhat camouflaged as well. It's a great pyramidal vessel surrounded by a force field of the most beautiful spherical shimmering sea of azure blue crystal that you have ever seen. The great city is parked like a great interstellar warship right in the war zone itself. God created and chose the moon itself as the physical form to shield the city and be the physical doorway, or portal if you prefer, through which the great city will first appear. It will appear quite suddenly and catch the whole world by surprise, like a thief in the night. Surprise! What a thief and what a night that will be. Our home, our city, the capital of our nation, the greatest mothership, spaceship, and stellar battleship ever constructed, will appear and then descend as though out of the moon itself and approach the earth. As that great day approaches, huge celestial ships like this one will begin to arrive, loaded with people coming in from everywhere in God's great kingdom. They will all come to join in the great battle to enter the great marriage feast of the Lamb. The question was posed, what if they could shoot at the city with some of their nuclear missiles? I asked. The response was, they might try it, but the city is well defended from all weapons of devils or man. God encased it in a blue spherical force field, able to withstand any physical attack, even the fury of the final great battle, the Battle of Gog and Magog, which comes at the end of the millennium. After that final battle, God will clean up the whole surface of the earth with fire and replace its entire atmosphere. I think we'll be pretty thankful for how strong he made our outer shields then. It might help to remember that Jesus and millions of inhabitants of the city have been getting ready for this battle for a long time now, and have worked on the city itself for nearly 2,000 years Earth time, so don't worry about a few worldly weapons wrecking heaven for us. The battleship's first battle, I pose, was in the gap. In Genesis 1:1, we have the creation of the universe. Then there is a gap of time before the chaos described in Genesis 1:2. In this gap of time, Lucifer eventually falls. Afterwards, as a result of his fall, and God's response to his fall, earth becomes formless. Then in Genesis 1:3, we have the reformation of the earth. In Job 9:4-13, we read, God is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has defied him without harm? It is God who removes the mountains. They know not how. When he overturns them in his anger, who shakes the earth out of its place? and its pillars? Who commands the sun not to shine, and sets a seal upon the stars? God will not turn back his anger. Beneath him crouch the helpers of Rahab. Langford writes, this is an amazing passage from several respects. It first of all associates a tremendous destruction of the earth and even the heavens within the context of a rebellion against God. Who has defied him, God, without harm? It even suggests that the associates of such a rebellion now have experienced God's anger, and beneath him, God, crouch the helpers, the angels of Rahab, Satan. By now we can piece together the acts the scriptures are revealing to us, namely at some distant time in the past, there was a rebellion against God. In particular, Satan, also known as Rahab, defied God among the helpers, meaning the angelic beings. This rebellion was met with an outpouring of God's anger and wrath. This wrath meant cataclysmic convulsions not only upon the earth, but also in the starry heavens. Let's also consult Isaiah 14:12-15. How you are, or have fallen, if it's the past tense, from heaven, the third heaven, or the satellite Jerusalem, O star of the morning, who would be Lucifer, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to earth with a little e, or is it with a capital E and thereby referring to a planet? You who have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, presumably either the third heaven, or perhaps it could be instead satellite Jerusalem. I will rise my throne. Well, that raises the question, where was Lucifer's throne originally? Above the stars. Is this talking about astral stars or angels of God? And I will sit on the Mount of Assembly, which raises the question, what mountain? In the recesses of the north. Okay, but the north of which planet? I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. Again, I ask of which planet? I will make myself like the Most High. And again, the question is, by sitting where? Nevertheless, you are, or will be, if it's future, thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world a wilderness, and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the houses of his prisoners? The questions when and where should be foremost on our minds. Let's consult Ezekiel 28:12-17 also. Rise a lamentation over the king of Tyre, and say to him, thus says the Lord God, you have made a seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You are in Eden. Again, I ask, on or above what planet and when? The garden of God, every precious stone was your covering. You are the anointed cherub who covers, and I placed you there. You are on the holy mountain of God. I interject, the heavenly city equals the satellite Jerusalem. You walked in the midst of the firestones, which I propose is talking about Planet Rahab in the midst of the 9 planets. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. By the abundance of your interplanetary, interstellar, intergalactic trade. So what trade was being talked about? How extensive was it? You were internally filled with violence, and you sinned. Therefore I have, or will, cast you as profane from the mountain of God. Again, I interject, the heavenly Eden equals the satellite Jerusalem. I have, will, incomplete past tense, or future, destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. I interject that this is talking about Planet Rahab, it being in the midst of the 9 planets. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor. I have, past tense, cast you to the ground, of which planet? I exposed, past tense, you before kings, that they may see you. I use this picture to help illustrate the classical gap theory. This is just an excerpt from the illustration. Johannes Kepler thought there should be an additional planet between Mars and Jupiter. A bit later, Titus noted the curious spacing of the planets. Each was twice the distance from the sun as its predecessor. Bode formulated this as a law in 1778, leading to an intensive search for the missing planet. So as you look at the planets, Rahab, I am put in the middle, and then Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. But Rahab was destroyed. Theme is astute in suggesting that New Jerusalem is the Garden Eden mountain of God, in which Lucifer resided and from which he was cast in the prehistoric past, and that this city was in the third heaven. In my book, The Outer Darkness, I pose 3 possible locations of the Emerald Eden, being New Jerusalem. The third heaven is the ambrosial rim surrounding the earth in which the angelic sons recline. The second heaven is the astral realm surrounding the earth in which stellar stars reside. The first heaven is the aerial realm surrounding earth in which birds fly. Yes, Lucifer was cast from the Emerald Eden, but it was not in the third heaven at the time. As to the probable location of Emerald Eden above Earth, in this model, the early Earth is pictured as having the supercontinent Pangaea, meaning all earth, all land. Some creationists adopt this theory, some do not. The working model adopted herein adopts this proposal. The continents were broken apart by the flood, either the Luciferian or Noachian flood. As to Lucifer's interplanetary trading in Ezekiel 28:16, Olson, in his book The Paradise of God, says we know that Adam was the first man created. So the trading that Lucifer was involved in was with another intelligent group of beings that at the very least had something to trade with Lucifer that he wanted. These beings were grouped into nations and had kings. They obviously spoke, reasoned, and had intelligence. Who were they, and where did they go? They may have been angels, or they may have been another creation of God, because we know that there are other heavenly hosts. But we know that they were not men, as we are today, because Adam was the first man, and he was not created until after the fall of Lucifer. We also know that their number was great enough that they were divided into nations with kings. Nations have boundaries, laws, military, and currency. Obviously, there was a great civilization of some type, and we know that they were on the earth because Lucifer was cast down before them, and he was cast to the earth. New Jerusalem is God's holy mountain. Janet Willis, in her book, What on Earth the Seven Lights, says, when John says there will no longer be any death, and there will no longer be any curse, the context is in New Jerusalem. So there will no longer be any death or curse in New Jerusalem. We often assume that throughout the new earth, wolves will not harm lambs. However, both passages that describe this condition mention a specific locality. The prophet makes a point of saying, they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. This could be referring exclusively to New Jerusalem. Since God chose to identify himself during the first millennia after the flood as the God of the mountain, it seems likely that details about what God's working place looked like were known to human inhabitants on earth prior to the flood. This might also explain why Abraham was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. If God did not remove his holy mountain up into another realm right away, then ancient peoples of the world would have had some knowledge of what at least the exterior of God's home looked like. God's holy mountain then would have been removed before the worldwide flood. I offer a counter-proposal. I have a similar view, though not identical. Unlike Willis, I do not believe that the heavenly city was on earth, or that it was the Garden of Eden. But I do suspect that the city was suspended above the earth, above the Garden of Eden, and had an access point from the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve saw the heavenly city suspended in the sky above the garden. After the fall, the ancient peoples of the earth could have seen its exterior since it was a satellite city up in the sky. The ancient peoples knew about the city. They could see it. Willis poses that it was removed from earth before the flood, since she believes the city was resting on the earth. Contrarily, I pose that the city was in orbit above the earth until the flood ended. As to the probable location of Emerald Eden after the Luciferian flood, I picture the Emerald Eden, that is New Jerusalem, above the flooded earth. The destruction of Planet Rahab is described in 3 primary texts. In Job 26, he quieted the sea with his power, and by his understanding he shattered Rahab. By his breath the heavens are cleared, and his hand has pierced the fleeing serpent. Thou thyself didst crush Rahab like one who is slain. Thou didst scatter thy enemies with thy mighty arm. Awake, wake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the days of Lord, the generations long ago. Was it not thou who cut Rahab in pieces, who pierced the dragon? How did God destroy Planet Rahab? I pose that he did so via a scalar blast from New Jerusalem. Biblical Star Wars. Dankenberg's book, Beyond Star Wars, is dedicated to the thesis that the original Star Wars was between Satan and his fallen angels versus God and the holy angels. He says scientists speculate that life may exist on other planets, but no man has any real knowledge of such. Whether or not there's physical life or highly intelligent life on other planets, no man knows. However, the Bible does reveal that God is the supreme creator of all things. Originally, we know, multitudes of angels inhabited the earth, and during those millions of years, perhaps, they were preparing earth for the eventual creation and rulership of man. As supreme creator, designer, and architect of the universe, as well as supreme life giver, it is very possible, even likely, that God also created life forms on multitudes of other planets. There is no reason to believe that the multitudes of other planets are all barren, waste, and empty. As Isaiah stated, God is not the author of confusion, disorder, or emptiness. As to aliens, Timothy Alberino, in his book Birthright, says the planets in our solar system were once inhabited by non-human civilizations, before they were reduced to rubble in the Pre-Adamic War of Insurrection. The work of Christ pertains exclusively to the sons of Adam. If Jesus did not die to atone for the sins of the angels, then why should we demand he die for the aliens? Mankind was created for fellowship in the family of God, then corrupted through sin. Alien beings such as insectolans may also have been created for a purpose peculiar to their own, and then corrupted even by the same serpent. So here we have an insectolan. And he goes on to say, it is possible that insectolans are using human DNA to slow the genetic decline of their species. As the whole universe of matter is subject to entropy, all living things are expiring together, including the greys. So he's talking about insectolans and greys being used in abduction of human beings for genetic modification. As to who built the Preadamic Cities, Dill, in his book In the Beginnings, plural, asks, who built these cities that were destroyed before Adam was created? He states that 2 sub-theories have emerged. The first is that men, some type of human or humanid creatures, existed before Adam. The other is that angels dwelt on the pre-Adamic earth and built cities. Whether it was men or angels, or both, is unimportant as far as the gap theory itself is concerned. What matters is that there was intelligent life on earth before the 6 days of Genesis. There was a pre-Adamic civilization. I'm of the opinion that angels lived on earth and built cities prior to earth's destruction. I believe it was Lucifer and the fallen angels who caused earth to be made desolate and the universe to groan under the power of sin. I believe this because the Bible tells us about a judgment prior to Adam, and it says nothing about humans. Dill's preference for an exclusively angelic inhabitation is not particularly strong, however. For one thing, the text refers to the absence of men rather than of angels. I looked and behold, there was no man, Adam. Jeremiah 4:25. Why do some RETs, that is, ruined earth theorists, pose that these Preadamic cities have been occupied by angels when the text is focused on Preadamic humanoids? Were the angels at this time terrestrials? Were the angels at this time men? Posing that these cities were inhabited exclusively by angels is more problematic than allowing that they were humanoid habitations up until the time of their destruction. Furthermore, if the angels were the only ones building the physical buildings, then they would have had physical bodies at the time. In that case, you would think that they would have been engaged in physically reproductive sex among themselves. Jesus indicates that angels in heaven do not have procreative sex. The classical gap position is that a pre-Adamic race of humans, or humanoids, inhabited this original creation. Pre-Adamites on other planets. These pre-Adamic humans inhabited other planets throughout the creation also. The destruction of their inhabitants in this solar system would not entail their destruction in other solar systems. An affirmation of the current existence of pre-Adamic humans on planets throughout creation would be a practical corollary of the classical gap theory. For myself, affirming pre-Adamic humanoids is less problematic, especially when enjoined with additional corollaries, such as affirming that Adamic humans have a different physical DNA and spiritual capacity than that of any other species, and only Adamic humans have the capacity to become the bride of Christ. Admittedly, in my contrarian opinion, pre-Adamic humanoids were probably created in the image of God and thus susceptible to murder. Quite likely, other morally accountable creatures were likewise created in the image of God and susceptible to murder as well. As to ancient astronauts, chariots of the gods, is a classic from an atheistic perspective. And he poses the question, was God an astronaut? My answer is yes. The Lord Jesus, the creator of the universe, came to earth in his golden spaceship, New Jerusalem, parked it above earth at the Garden of Eden, got out of his spaceship, and made Adam out of the dust of the earth. While angelic male and female members of the divine council watched how he did it. Which answers Daniken's question as to why the Lord used plural in Genesis 1:26-27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. And God created man in his own image. In the image of gods and goddesses he created them. Male and female he created them. Translation mine. How about pre-Adamic wars? Well, we might look at Zachariah Stitchen's book, The Wars of Gods and Men. We might also look at The Giza Death Star Destroyed by Joseph Farrell. I have a counter-proposal to Farrell. From ancient extra-biblical texts, Farrell poses that Murdoch's thunderbolt is a scalar energy weapon launched from his celestial chariot, which Farrell pictures as a four-sided pyramid in a sphere used to explode planet Tiamat. Farrell acknowledges that these accounts are garbled. His ungarbling of them fails, in my opinion, to give adequate attention to several biblical facts. 1. This war was fought in the stellar heavens with the biblical God of heaven. 2. Much more. This biblical Lord of host armies had his throne in a mobile heavenly command center that could serve as a warship spaceship. Rather than pit these planetary gods against themselves, these planetary gods were fighting the heavenly God. The most natural supposition is that he would have fought them from his heavenly chariot, heavenly Jerusalem. The explosion of Planet Rahab by a scalar energy beam from heavenly Jerusalem resulted in comets from some of the larger remains of Rahab and kicked Mars into a cometary orbit until it retained its planetary orbit. Initially, Mars and Earth were struck with limited nuclear blasts in the past, but as the cosmic war escalated, Planet Rahab was exploded by a scalar blast from heavenly Jerusalem that resulted in fiery comets of debris hitting Mars and Earth, followed by both Mars and Earth being inundated with water from the celestial deluge of this exploded planet. This is my little video of the destruction of Planet Rahab as it's represented in orbit. New Jerusalem is located to the north of Planet Rahab. New Jerusalem sends a scalar blast to destroy Planet Rahab. Rahab is a watery planet. When it is destroyed by New Jerusalem, an asteroid belt is left. Mars is thrown into an elliptical orbit, and water engulfs Earth. And that is the conclusion of this overview from Chapter 3 of Misthological Models, Part 5, at mythology.org or unconditionalsecurity.org or theouterdarkness.org. So there are the links there. As to my printed books, you'll see them noted at my website. And when you go there, you can find Mythological Models Part 5. If you want a PDF, you can click on the title up at the top in blue. Otherwise, you can click on the cover for getting printed books or a Kindle version.